wasn't expecting that, Sam.
I was telling them earlier they made some changes to this dungeon to where the poison that's sticking on me right now is much nastier.
Oh, that's at this point needed. Oh, fuck.
Hey everyone, Wargs here. So we're back with our second warrior guide. Again, we go in alphabetical order. So we did arms the other day. That video is up there. Or now we're going to be doing Fury Warrior. Now, Fury Warrior is looking like it is going to be the best overall spec right now for both Raid and Mythic Plus purposes, at least based off of the simulations that I've done and looking at the general feedback from the warrior community. So it's in a good place, has the potential to be the warrior of choice in things like the Race to World First, if you're not playing a prot warrior, which is also looking very good, spoiler alert. So let's go ahead and start looking at the guide for Fury Warrior. Now, just like in the Arms Warrior guide, I want to start off with this. Number one, my guides are not aimed at high-level advanced players. All right? Most of you don't need a guide anyways. You've experimented enough. My guides are targeted at beginners to Fury, or what I would dub intermediate players. People that are maybe playing it for like the second tier, are still getting comfortable with it. The gameplay has changed a little bit, so they need to know what they need to do in order to get there. So that's who my guides are aimed at. So if you're an advanced player and you find this useful for maybe your friend that's playing a warrior for the first time, or someone that has just recently switched in your guild roster, I appreciate you sending them this video if you want to do that. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all that other fun stuff. So what do I do in my guide videos? Well, we're going to talk about obviously your talent builds. We are going to talk about the rotation. We will talk about your stats and your consumables and enchants, and then we'll look at weapons and trinkets to target throughout the season. I'm not going to do a full best in slot gear list because I just don't find that to be all that useful, as Dornagal is getting ready to reign in this game, which is fun. So we see here now, obviously I got my warrior in the Trading Post chest set. I love it. It's very good, very cool. And we'll talk about things like your Reshi wraps as well. There are things that you can do on that end, and what you need to slot in and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started in. We're going to start with talent builds. Now, I was doing keys last night, or zeros last night, so we'll go ahead and just start with the Mythic Plus build in this case because I'm already in it. All right, so there's not a ton of changes for Fury Warrior coming from Season 2 to Season 3. The big one I think you'll notice in the Mythic Plus build is we're now playing Champion Spear. Just gives a little bit of a heavier burst profile. And then of course you're running Piercing Challenge and Champion's Might in both of these. So it just gives that little bit of a better like big burst profile. So if you have it up and it's shares a 1.5 minute cooldown with Roar, so it's not like you're using it more often than you would Roar throughout a dungeon. It just offers that little bit of bigger burst, and it does offer that little bit of control, because if a mob that jumps out, for example, think the one mobs in Theater of Pain, for example, that jumped out and then cast Withering Discharge. They try to jump out, but they're hooked by the spear, they get roped back in. So it offers a little bit of mob control as well, whereas Thunderous Roar does not. Warrior class that historically needs more utility for dungeon groups, this is a little bit of piece that they get for it. Beyond that, there is one major flex point that I want to discuss, and that's Rallying Cry. In a Mythic Plus build, there are warriors that don't run Rallying Cry because you generally have a plethora of defensives already, and a Rallying Cry is not necessarily going to do a ton to save you. So you see some people running like Intimidating Shout for this build, or if they want some more personal sustain, they'll grab something like Second Wind. Or if they want more mobility, they grab Fast Footwork. Or you can grab Rumbling Earth. So this point in Rallying Cry, you can kind of put wherever you need to in order to fit some different utility profiles. So that you can flex your build a little bit to kind of fit the situation. Which is never a bad thing. Unfortunately, you only get 1 point to do that. I think most of the rest of these points are pretty locked in. So there's not a lot of flexibility in the warrior tree, but you at least have this 1 point in Rallying Cry. I take Rally at least early in the season because it, as we're gearing up, and learning keys and limit testing, this allows a little bit more flexibility in how we limit test. So I think early it's pretty good, but as you get more comfortable with the damage patterns of every dungeon, you gain your new tier set, maybe you gain more damage, obviously more survivability because you're better aware of where the damage is coming from. Then you can swap into other things that are going to offer that extra bit of utility as you need it. All right. We are still playing the Mountain Thane hero talent, of course. Nothing has changed really in your choice nodes. You still want the Stormbolt under 3 targets, just because, again, more CC. Keep your feet on the ground, just as the flat physical damage versus Steadfast of the Peaks, which gives you a little bit more HP. There might be some value in this if you play Mountain Thane and Raid, but why would you? And then you run Flashing Strikes. Snap Induction still just doesn't really have a lot of value. And then we did switch off of Gathering Clouds. I know a lot of people were playing that last season. Here you're just gaining a little bit of extra rage, and then you're getting your Raging Blow set up through Thorum's Might, and then of course Avatar of the Storm is everything that this is built around. We are a little bit more Raging Blow focused this patch than we are previously, so Thorum's Might has a little bit more value. Over in the class tree, not a ton of things have changed. There are a couple small things to make note of. We are not running Bloodborne. We are not running, because I know there were some builds last season with Thunderous Roar we were running that. Hack and Slash for Mythic Plus is not being run right now because you have a ton of rage generation, so you don't really, and you can get a lot of refreshes on Raging Blow naturally through other means, so this talent doesn't have a ton of value. And Ashen Juggernaut is not being played here in favor of other talents. So I don't think we were running this last season. Still running Ravager over Bladestorm in Mythic Plus just because, you know, this is 3.1 seconds, this is 9.4 seconds, so it's much longer in terms of its damage profile, so it's just going to do a lot more. Whereas Bladestorm offers a little bit more single target instant burst, which is going to be better actually for raid setups than it is for Mythic Plus setups. Reckless Abandon versus Anger Management. I've seen some conversation on this. I think Anger Management's still going to be better just because you are getting more recklessnesses. You're getting recklessness more often. Whereas Crushing Blow just makes that cooldown a little bit more powerful. There are some people that are experimenting with Reckless Abandon. I don't know if it's going to work out long term. I think early on, Anger Management's a safer pick. And then, of course, you're getting Unbridled Ferocity, which gives you that little bit of recklessness passively, and then you get Depths of Insanity, which makes it last longer. We are still running things like Cold Steel, Hot Blood, so you would think this makes crit much more valuable. But there is talents that allow you to gain more crit value on Bloodthirst. There is a weak aura that allows you to tell you, tells you when you use Bloodthirst correctly. Yeah, here it is, Blood Graze. So Raging Blow increases the critical strike chance of your next Bloodthirst by 15% until it critically strikes, stacking up to 5 times. So you can get basically a guaranteed crit on Bloodthirst, which then always proc Cold Steel, Hot Blood. So there is some play on that, but generally speaking, for a beginner's type setup, I wouldn't think too hard on this until you kind of get the basic comfort down. So not a ton of changes. The gameplay variation is still the same. Obviously, you grab Improved Whirlwind and Meat Cleaver for your AoE situation, because Fury is one of those specs, much like Shadow Priest and to a lesser extent Beastmastery Hunter, where you do your single target as your AoE rotation. You just use something to impact that. Psychic Link for Shadow Priest. Beast Cleave ends up being the thing for Beastmastery Hunter. For Warrior, it's just you mix in a Whirlwind every few abilities. Alright, so let's talk the raid build. So the raid build, again, not a ton of changes. In fact, I think in the Warrior side tree there are no changes. You grab Shockwave simply only so you can get to Reinforce Plates and Armor to the Teeth, because I think because obviously this is just really good versus going down here and grabbing seismic reverberation or concussive blows. Obviously, more stamina, more armor, not a bad thing, especially when you grabbed armor to the teeth, where you gain more strength equal to your armor. There's just that connection to it. Other than that, I don't think a ton has changed. Like, you're still grabbing pain and gain to give you a little bit more sustain and ability to live. Rallying cry is much more important. Obviously, in a raid situation, a lot of the times it'll be set up by your raid lead. Fast footwork gives you a little bit more movement. So when you have to do those mechanics, you're getting in and out faster. Sidearm for these single target setups, and then of course you're grabbing Thunderous Roar because it just gives a little bit more sustained damage over the course of the fight versus Champion Spear, which is a much more like burst AoE type ability. And then of course you're grabbing Avatar with Berserker's Torment, as we kind of always do. Over in the tree over here, really the biggest differences is you're not taking Improved Whirlwind and Meat Cleaver. Instead, you're grabbing Ashen Juggernaut and a point in Critical Thinking. And then of course you're also grabbing Hack and Slash. You're also taking Sudden Death and Improved Execute, so that you can play into your Slayer effect. There are some people too that will take this point out of Critical Thinking, which just gives like it's passive crit the entire time, so it's always effective. But there are some people, if you find that execute is really important, or like sub 40% or sub 30% is like the most important part of the fight. Think of a fight like One Armed Bandit, where phase 1 it didn't really matter what you did until you got to phase 2. And then your damage mattered, and that happens at 30%. So getting Massacre early on was going to be like, that was a flex point that you could do where you'd prioritize the damage that you needed. So that is technically a flex point. I don't know how useful it's going to be. We'll have to see how the fights play out. I haven't heard of any fights that are like super heavy execute necessary, so we will go from there. So we'll see. But the build doesn't really change from Season 2, honestly. Like, you're still taking all the major talents. You're grabbing Frenzied and Rage because you gain that extra haste, gain that extra movement speed. As always, then of course you're grabbing that Hack and Slash so that you can always be raging and blowing. Blowing, rather. In the talent, or the hero talent tree, Relentless Pursuit or Vicious Agility, I've seen both being picked. I think this is just really one of those situations where you kind of want to see what you want to do in the fight. If there's a lot of in and out on a fight, like Luminar, for example, I know there's a fight where you have to like get pretty far out and then hoof it back in pretty quickly. And so something like Vicious Agility might see a little bit more value there. But this is like a personal utility, like what do you want off of your charge heroic leap? So like pick either one of these. Like this is completely free choice in my opinion. Fierce follow through, obviously getting that because Bloodthirst's making the damage of your next Bloodthirst bigger versus more on Raging Blow. Obviously we want these when we do hit these big Bloodthirsts to proc Cold Steel Hot Blood. We want them to be very, very powerful. And then of course we're taking Brutal Finish, which gives you that big rampage damage after a Blade Storm. And this one does like AoE damage, and this is a single target build. So Slayer hero talent hasn't changed. The Season 2 build doesn't change really at all. Again, DPS Warriors didn't see a ton of changes coming into this patch cycle, and so for a lot of people that was very disappointing. I think Warriors in general, especially Arms Warriors, but even Fury Warriors, were hoping for maybe something a little bit to kind of vary up the gameplay or give them something to look forward to, but instead we're kind of looking at a continuation of patch 11.1, just with a slightly different tier set. So we'll see what happens. All right, rotation. Let me grab the notes I made on the rotation. Now the rotation for Fury Warrior is pretty much the same for single target and AoE. The only difference is that in AoE you're going to loop in a Whirlwind before you actually start the single target rotation, so that you cleave that onto multiple enemies. And you just want to make sure that you're either Whirlwinding or Thunderclapping on every fourth, basically every fourth ability, so that you're maintaining your 5-target cleave throughout the fight. Now Fury is hard capped at 5 targets, which means that your damage is pretty consistent throughout a dungeon in terms of what you do on your AoE packs, but you're never going to hit like those insane highs that like an Unholy DK, a Devastation Evoker, or even a Frost DK is going to see. I've seen really big bursts out of Feral Druid as well, coming in with their big AoE rotations. So like from a melee perspective, your damage is much more consistent. Like you're always going to be sitting, say like, 4 or 5 million on a lot of your bigger pulls, but you're not going to be hitting that like 18, 20 million peaks very often. But for example, versus like a Destruction Warlock that say blows all their cooldowns on like the first pull of Priory, for example, which a lot of people do a very, very big pull on that. As they go in and pull the second one into the first kind of boss mob that comes through, that lieutenant mob that comes through, they've blown everything, so they're kind of just praying for a little bit, waiting for that stuff to cycle back up, whereas you are ready to go again. So your damage profile is very consistent. But let's talk opener. So on the opener with Anger Management Talented, you will actually use Recklessness and Avatar before the pull, and then you'll charge in. So let me get everything set. So we're gonna Recklessness, Avatar, charge, Rampage, and then we got a Whirlwind, Blade Storm, boom, boom, Rampage, Bloodthirst, Thunderous Roar. I hit an extra Raging Blow in there. And of course you see we've got the Massacre proc, so you want to use that. Multi-target, you're basically doing that without doing that. So again, you Recklessness and Avatar. Now with the way the cooldowns are set up, you should have these, generally speaking, at the same time. Now when you spend Rage, you're going to get this down much faster, so you should be able to do 2 Recklessness for every 1 Avatar. And then basically you want to make sure that you're always rampaging as soon as you can. Rampage to maintain your Enrage effect, which is your mastery. You're going to make sure that you're executing with 3 stacks of Marks for Execution. I would also, just speaking generally, just use it. Mark for Execution is your hero talent thing here. Basically, make sure next execute stack quite high. There are weak auras to track it and stuff like that. I wouldn't stress too much about it if you're just learning the spec, but just know that when you execute procs, you want to use it. Now, things like Blade Storm and Thunderous Roar, you want to use those while you're in the Enraged effect, because again, based off of your mastery, you gain extra damage. So you get, in my case, it's 44% damage because it's based off your mastery. Right here. And then, of course, you get that extra movement speed and extra haste. So you always want to make sure that you're using those 2 during Enrage, because you're going to gain, obviously, much more damage off of that. Raging Blow is going to be the primary way that you generate your Rage. It's going to be the most used builder, so to speak. And then Bloodthirst you want to use when you have that high crit value. Now, I've got my weak auras right here. You can see that I've got, it says 19%. That means that right now I've got a 19% chance to crit on Bloodthirst. So I wouldn't necessarily want to run in and use it right away, because I would effectively waste the chance to proc that Cold Steel Hot Blood. So there are ways that you can be able to track this. I use this weak aura package to do it, but there's a weak aura out there that all it does is track your crit chance on Bloodthirst, and when that procs, you just hit it. So gives you the best chance to maintain those high Cold Steel Hot Blood uptimes. And then if you need to fill, which if you have enough haste and you kind of do the rotation correctly, you can Whirlwind or Slam in order to fill the gaps. Ideally, you never really have to. But if it happens to be there, that's a way that you can do it. I usually do it with Whirlwind because I have it on a button that is habit to do for I'm playing a Mythic Plus build. Now let me switch over to the Mythic Plus build, and then we're going to run over here to the multi-target group. Because in multi-target situations... Oops, not this one, this one. That thing. Champion Spear. Alright, pull the notes. There we go. So, in these single multi-target situations, what you're going to do is again, you can rampage and avatar as you're running in. So like, you know, you charge in, hit those 2 buttons, whirlwind, hit that, you know, as you can see. See, now I've run out of stacks. I've got this stacked up and it restacks them. You can see here, I've got big, and it hits all 3 targets. So basically all you're doing is just weaving this. Again, you can track this. I think Personal Resource Management does it if you don't use add-ons. This week core package just puts it at the bottom for me, and go from there. Now, other things like Thunderous Roar or Champion Spear, you're going to use those, or Ravager in this case. You use it after you hit that first rampage so that you get the Enrage. And basically your single target rotation is the same in order to do that. Now, I've seen some debate on whether or not you use Whirlwind or you use Thunderclap in order to, in this build, to get your improved Whirlwind setup going. Some people think Whirlwind does more damage when you don't have Thunderblast activated. I've messed around with it a little bit in Season 2, Season 3. I don't see a noticeable difference in damage when I only Thunderclap when I have a Thunderblast ready versus, and then using Whirlwind any other time versus when I just Thunderclap all the time. So I would just Thunderclap all the time. Make it very, very simple. Alright, let's move on now to your statistics. What are you looking for with your stats? Now, Fury Warrior historically has been a haste mastery class, and guess what? That hasn't changed. You're still going to want to stack mastery number 1, haste number 2, with verse and crit kind of being equal in 3 and 4. Just because, again, you don't need necessarily a ton of crit stacking in order to proc Cold Steel Hot Blood, because you have Blood Graze going. So, now that said, always sim yourself anytime you get these upgrades and things like that. So, but if you're looking for something like what kind of pieces do I need to target, haste mastery pieces are always really good. But if you get like a, you know, verse mastery piece or a, you know, crit mastery or haste crit type piece, that's fine as well. It's not going to be like the end of days. All right, let's talk consumables and enchants. So the best overall enchant going into Season 3, I ran a lot of Authority of the Depths. As you can see, I have it on both my weapons currently. I think my fat head's in the way of them, but I have it on there. But I will be switching over to Oathsworn's Tenacity, which gives you a lot of versatility. Just makes you harder to kill. But you can also use something like Stormrider's Fury, which gives you haste if you're a little bit struggling in the haste department. I am not, so I'll probably throw some Oathsworn's Tenacities on my next set of weapons. On the cloak, the Rushy Wraps, which obviously you're going to get that. Which fiber do you use? You want to use the... I'm using the crit one because, again, I do play all 3 specs, and crit is generally okay for all 3 specs. But if you're just a Fury trick, you probably want to actually put the versatility one in there or the haste one in there. And then for enchant, you can use either Burrowing Rapidity or Chant of Wing Grace, which gives Wing Grace's avoidance. Burrowing Rapidity is speed. It doesn't really matter. I like speed. I like movement speed. I like moving fast. Being fast as fuck boy. That type of thing. They're tertiary stats. The impact is actually not that huge, but you can use either. On your chest piece, it's still Crystalline Radiance, as it has been the entire expansion. Bracer is the same thing, either speed or avoidance. It doesn't really matter. Leg enchant, you're going to use the Defender's Armor Kit, which gives you the strength and the armor, because again, you gain strength off of the armor. So anytime you can increase your armor, even as DPS, never a bad thing. Defender's March is always for the boots, and then on your rings, you can see I'm running crit haste, because again, I put haste on this Jaster Diamond, because haste is never bad for all 3 specs, because I do play all 3. But again, if you're just Fury, then you want to run the... mastery gems or mastery enchants. All right, consumables, as always, Alchemical Chaos still the best one. I'll be buying some 3s here now that I'm main this character. Tempered Potions is always, of course, for your power pots. I got some Algari healing potions that I'm going to burn through, but there's a new invigorating healing potion that does a ton of health as well. You can also grab that, but it's always good to have healing pots on the side, especially Mythic Plus, where you don't necessarily always have a Warlock. And then in Raid, you gain the Warlock Healthstone and your healing pot, which gives you, again, even more ways to keep yourself alive. Algari Mana Oil, because of the haste mainly, but, you know, crit is not bad. Although you can use the Iron Claw Whetstone, or the Bladestone, Sharpstone, whichever one, depending on mace or axe or sword, which gives you more attack power, but I don't think it's as effective as the Mana Oil. Of course, you're going to want your Crystallized Augment runes. Now, this season is the season, of course, that they bring in the Everlasting one, the one that you can just click every single time and it's not a big deal. That'll be coming once you get your Karesh renown up, so do the renown grind, because 100,000 gold later, you're going to have an infinite Augment rune. For food, you can do Hardy's Bellet or Bounty or the Sushi Special or whatever feast is brought for your raid team. For your main diamond, you're going to want the Culminating Blasphemite, which is this one here, which gives you primary stat plus that small critical effect per unique gem color. And then for the majority of gems, again, I'm all over the place because I'm using Arms, Fury, and Prot setups, so I try to find like the balance between the three. But you're going to want Quick Onyxes, which are the High Mastery, Low Haste gems with one Masterful Emerald, which is the High Haste, Low Mastery, so you can get more impact out of your primary stat gem. Alright, your Disc Belt, you want to run Critical Chain, because it's just the best one. Now, with the Disc Belt, for most people, you're going to be replacing this roughly, I would say, if you get like a 4 of 6 hero track or 4 of 8, whatever the max is, like you get halfway through a hero track, that's probably around the time that you're going to do it. I've seen some people even say their sims are giving them like 8 of 8 champion, which is 691, or excuse me, it's not 691, it's like 710 or something like that, is out simming what this is going to do. So you're not going to hold on to this for a while, but while you are, go ahead and put the critical chain on there. It's just good for all content. Just set it and forget it. Alright, let's look at some gear and best in slot options. Now, let's start with weapons. And there are a couple of options that you can look for when it comes to good weapons for, for both Raid and Mythic Plus. So the best overall options are going to come from the dungeons, and it is our good buddy in Floodgate, the Circuit Breaker. Haste Mastery, best stats, strong sword, has a really funny look. You know, it's chainsaw. So, just overall really good. And then as a second sword, you're probably in your best bet to do a crafted sword. And do a Haste Mastery crafted Everforged Great Axe or Everforged Longsword, whichever one you want to do. So that's going to be your best setup. Now that said, if you happen to be running, say, like Heroic Raid or something like that, and you find yourself getting this weapon off Forge Weaver Araz, the Photon Saber Prime, another good one that you can go chase if you can get it off of Myth. It's the 4th boss, so you could probably get this Myth track, combine that with your either a Myth track Circuit Breaker or a Myth track or, you know, high crafted weapon, then you're going to be in a really, really good place overall there. So you have 3 weapons really that are Haste Mastery based that you can go grab that are going to be really, really solid. And you're not going to be necessarily hurting yourself at all in order to get them. So you have 3 really, really good weapon options. All right, let's talk trinkets. So there are a number of trinkets this season that are quite good. The first one, I think everyone kind of knows, is going to be the Autocrator Sack Brood. Just gives that big amount of strength. The spider damage thing is not like, it's not impactful. We don't care about it. It's really the strength, and then of course it has haste on it, which is never a bad stat. Sack Brood, I think, is just going to end up being one of the best trinkets across the board for almost every spec that doesn't hate haste. So everyone but Brewmaster, basically. Maybe Survival Hunter. But like, this trinket is just really, really good. It's passive. You don't have to think about it. It's going to give you a bunch of strength. It's just a very, very, very good trinket. And I think the primary reason this dungeon was voted to be put back into the Mythic Plus rotation for Season 3. Other ones out of the dungeon pool, you can go into Tazavesh. And there are a couple that you can look at there. That is the Ticking Sack of Terror, obviously big mastery. And then you can just passively deal some extra fire damage out there. So it can proc sometimes at unfortunate times. But if you're looking for a good mastery stat stick, Ticking Sack of Terror is going to be really good. I don't know that I would put it in like the top 3 trinkets. I'd probably put it just outside that, but it is a very good one. As is Solia's Secret Technique, which allows you to just basically give someone else good primary stat for 30 minutes. If you know there's another spec that really likes mastery, say your Shadow Priest or your Moonkin Druid or your Frost Decay or your Unholy Decay, just give them a little bit of their highest secondary stat, and then you gain a bunch more of that secondary stat. So not a bad trinket. Again, you do have to maintain it every 30 minutes. You have to think about it, make sure that you're using it every now and then, but again, not a bad one that you can go chase out of the dungeons, as is the one that I'm actually wearing currently, and that is Sephorian Pacemaker. Crit, not the greatest stat here, but it is, again, another decent little passive stat stick. It's very, very good for arms, very, very good for protection, because they both like crit. But Fury doesn't like crit as much, so this one, if you can get it, I think it's a good bridge item to getting something like a Sack Brood or these two Raid Trinkets that we're going to talk about. But I wouldn't necessarily say this is a Abyss one, but it is, I would call it a good bridge one. As you can see, I've got a 691 that I grabbed out of the Mythic Zeros this week, so I'm going to use it. It's an eye level upgrade over what I had. Now, out of the raid, there are 2 trinkets that we want to look at, and both of them come pretty early. I think the second best trinket outside of Sack Brood is going to be this Astral Antenna. Huge amount of crit, huge amount of strength, obviously, on it, and the orb that you get actually goes basically to your feet, so you don't have to actively chase it around like you did, like the transmitter, things like that, where they would like spawn at a specific spot and just walk towards the boss, and if you didn't get in between it, you were screwed. This one actually follows you around, so you don't really have to do anything at all. Like, it sounds like you might have to do stuff, but you really don't. You can do like little movements that don't take you out of melee range, maybe to grab it just to like a second earlier or something, but if you just want to stand there and wait for it to get to you, you can do that, and it's not a problem at all. So overall, like, really, really, really strong trinket. The other one is the Eradicating Arachnocore, which comes off the first boss. This is a good one that just does passive damage. So they have a high chance to charge the Arachnocore at 10 charges. It does arcane damage split between nearby enemies. You recover 2 charges if only one enemy is struck, so it has good value in single target, has good value in AoE, and then it does additional damage. So this is really, really good in AoE, probably might even be slightly better than Astral Antenna in that case, but at single target, I think Astral Antenna is good. So you might want to grab Sack Brood Antenna and this Arachnocore across all levels, just so that you can have like this flexibility in your trinket setup. Like I said, overall, I think Fury Warrior is in a really good spot. I think if you're going to see a warrior in like Race to World First content, I know a lot of people are looking forward to seeing what the top guilds in Liquid, Echo, and some of the others are going to bring in terms of content. I think Fury Warrior is probably your best shot if it's not Protection Warrior. Fury Warrior, excellent target switcher, consistent damage profile, very high APM. Your fingers, if you play it for a long period of time, like, you're going to have to stretch out your fingers and things like that. Make sure you don't cramp up because it is a high APM spec. You're going to be pushing a lot of buttons all the time, so be ready for that. But it is in a good place. I don't mind Fury Warrior at all. I prefer Arms. Personally, if you're making me pick one, like I could only pick one, I'm going to pick Arms. But I do enjoy Fury Warrior quite a bit. I think a lot of the issues that I've had with it in the past have been smoothed out and ironed out. They use both hero talent trees, which is good in different content. I enjoy, that's one thing I enjoy about the class in general. So yeah, it's in a really good space right now. I think if you're a DPS warrior that doesn't, just trying to figure out which one to play, I'd say probably start with Fury, and unless they make some changes to Arms, I don't really see it being a factor down the line, unless there's some late stat scaling that we don't really know about. But I mean, we've been able to gain gear up to like 710, and nothing has really shown that Arms is overtaking Fury anytime soon, unless Blizzard actively gets involved. So Let me know what you think down below. Like, share, subscribe, like I mentioned earlier in the video. Again, if you made it this far, I appreciate you very, very much. I'm on the road to 1,100 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours so that I can step up to the next tier of monetization. I'm just trying to do enough to make this little hobby make me a little bit of money. We all could use a little bit more money, especially in this economy. But that said, until the next video, I hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming, and we will see you next time.